All right, let's get right into it. Picture a country's economy like a really powerful car. Now, this car isn't going to drive itself. It needs a driver, someone who knows when to hit the gas, when to tap the brakes, and how to steer around all the bumps in the road. Well, in this analogy, the government is the driver, and their main set of controls, their steering wheel and pedals, that's what we call fiscal policy.
So, when you boil it all down, the number one question for the people in charge is always about balance. Is the engine sputtering, running too cold and struggling to get up to speed? Or is it overheating, redlining, and about to cause some serious damage? Getting that balance just right? Well, that's the whole game.
And this is basically the dashboard they're looking at. On one side, you've got a recessionary gap. That's when the economy is running cold. You've got people out of work, factories sitting idle. The country just isn't living up to its potential. Then, on the other side, you have an inflationary gap. This is the opposite problem. The engine is overheating, trying to produce more than it sustainably can, and that almost always leads to prices going up for everyone. So, to handle these gaps, governments have to reach into their toolkit. And the most powerful tools they have for this job fall under that banner of fiscal policy. This is how they actively try to get the car back to that smooth, steady speed. So, what exactly is fiscal policy? At its core, it's actually pretty straightforward. It's just the government making changes to how much it spends and how much it taxes, all with the specific goal of nudging the economy in one direction or another. That's really it. Spending more or less, taxing more or less. Those are the big levers. And those levers basically work like a gas pedal and a brake. Expansionary policy is the gas. The government either spends more money itself on things like infrastructure or services, or it cuts taxes so that you have more money to spend. Either way, the goal is to speed things up. And you guessed it, contractionary policy is the brake. The government spends less or it raises taxes, taking money out of the system to cool things down. Okay, but here's where it gets really, really interesting. A small tap on that gas pedal or that brake can have a way bigger impact than you might think. It's not a one-to-one thing. Instead, it creates this ripple that spreads through the whole economy. Let's dig into that. Economists have a name for this, of course. They call it the multiplier effect. And it's a huge concept. The basic idea is that when the government spends $1, that dollar doesn't just stop. It gets spent and then respent again, leading to a much bigger final boost to the economy. Let's make this super simple. Imagine the government spends $100 on a new public project. The person who does the work earns that $100. Now, they might save 20 of it, but they take the other $80 and spend it at a local store. Great. Now the shopkeeper has an extra $80. Maybe they save 16 and spend the other 64 at a restaurant. You can see where this is going, right? That first $100 is setting off a chain reaction of spending. So, what does all that add up to in the end? Well, in this specific example, where everyone spends 80% of their new income, that initial $100 from the government actually ends up creating $500 in total economic activity. That's a 5 times multiplier. It shows how a pretty small initial push can create a much bigger wave. Okay, so that's the theory, but how do we actually use this powerful tool to fix a problem? Let's go back to our economy that's running too cold, the one with that recessionary gap we talked about. This chart just lays it out perfectly. The bar on the left, potential GDP, shows where the economy should be if everything was running smoothly. Let's say that's a value of 2,000, but the bar on the right shows where we actually are. We're stuck down at 1620. And that big empty space between the bars, that's our problem. That is the output gap. It represents lost jobs and wasted potential. Let's put a number on it. The difference between where we could be at 2,000 and where we are at 1620 is $380. That's the hole we need to fill. That's our target. We need to generate an extra $380 of economic activity to get this car back up to full speed. And this brings us to the key question. To fill a $380 hole, does the government need to just spend $380? Your first instinct might be to say, well, yeah, but hang on a second. Remember what we just learned? Not quite. This is where our little secret weapon, the multiplier effect, comes into play. We know that every single dollar the government puts in is going to be magnified as it moves through the economy. And here is where it all clicks. You take the size of your problem, that $380 gap, and you divide it by your multiplier, which was 5. And what do you get? Just $76. I mean, think about that. To get $380 of new economic growth, the government only needs to inject an initial $76.
That small push creates the full ripple effect needed to close the gap. Now that is the power of fiscal policy.
But, of course, if it were all that simple and clean, the economy would be perfect all the time, right? In the real world, it's not always a smooth ride. And one of the biggest potential bumps on the road is something called the crowding out effect. So what is crowding out? Well, it's basically an unintended side effect of hitting the gas pedal. When the government spends more, it often has to borrow more money. And that can have the knock-on effect of pushing up interest rates, which then makes it more expensive for private businesses and regular people to borrow and spend. Here's how that chain reaction works. The government needs to borrow to fund its spending. That extra demand for loans can push interest rates up for everybody. Suddenly, a business thinking about building a new factory might pause because their loan is now more expensive. A family looking to buy a new car might hold off. This drop in private spending can then crowd out or cancel out some of the government's initial stimulus. So you see, it's this incredibly delicate balancing act. Fiscal policy is, without a doubt, a powerful steering wheel. But the driver has to be paying attention to everything, not just the gas and the brake, but how the whole engine is responding, because there can be these other counteracting forces at play. And that really brings us full circle, right back to this core idea from this source material. The main goal here isn't to floor it or to slam on the brakes all the time. The whole point is just stabilization, trying to keep the car on a smooth, steady path, as close to its potential speed as possible. Which leaves us with one last big thought to chew on. In a world that's constantly throwing new shocks and surprises at us, is fiscal policy a precise, reliable steering wheel? Or is it more like a big, clunky lever that we pull while driving through the fog, just hoping we're heading in the right direction? Well, that's the debate that economists and policymakers are still having every single day.